I know, we're procurement, so I accept boos and cheers, however you feel towards us. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for coming. What excites me is we have about double the audience we had last year, so that's progress. I don't know if you were obligated to be here or you chose to be here, but we'll take you either way. I also want to introduce Tyler Barnes. He's recently joined our group this year and comes from government procurement background as well. He's been with state purchasing, and now he's joined our team to help keep us straight.
Don't hold that against me, though.
So yeah, he's
state purchasing.
So I want to kick things off. Well, let me just, for those of you that might be thinking about leaving, we do have candy. I know there's candy in the exhibit hall, but we do have full-size candy bars. So they don't have that, I don't think. And I have some Mentos. What's that? We'll talk about that after. Sure, be glad to. And I also have some Mentos for those of you that maybe the breath isn't quite right this morning. We'll be handing those out if you answer questions correctly. So I hope we have questions. We're here to answer any procurement-related questions or concerns you have. But this is just a basic overview. I think for those of you that don't work in procurement every single day on your job, it's hard to remember all of the different rules that are associated with the government rules and regulations, the Utah Procurement Code. So that's what we hope to cover, just some general basics to get you guys on your way. So I'm going to turn the time over to Tyler to introduce our team.
So we did a recent change in the office. They brought me on, and you can see the difference there. Tracy's out at the warehouse, managing the warehouse now, and the warehouse staff out there, getting things hopefully better, in a better shape, and I'm running the procurement team there on the second floor. We also changed up our commodities. If you remember, for a long time, people had done the same thing for a very long time, and we got thinking about our continuity of operations plans and contingency plans if somebody left, and there's a lot of knowledge out there that hopefully needed to be passed on to somebody else. So we switched everybody's commodities up, and this is kind of the final result. If you see, I'm kind of taking over the TOC and a lot of the IT procurements. That's what I did at state purchasing, and Trevor Ward, we brought him up from the warehouse. He's now kind of the DTS guy. So if you need any hardware, software, that kind of thing, he's going to be taking over that ordering process. We're trying to automate it and make it online rather than going through a bureaucracy of emails and different things. So he's the guy heading that up. He's going to be tracking all your computers and inventorying all the software and hardware. So hopefully when you call up and want Adobe Pro or something, we already have the license available for that. Rather than buying it brand new, we can just reallocate a license, so it's a little bit cheaper. Jason's helping out with maintenance along with Wendy, and Penny's taking over equipment ops, and Paul Kikuchi is doing traffic and safety and a lot of the training and different things. All right, so now we're going to head into kind of a difference between contracted purchases versus regular purchases, small purchases, sole sources, kind of give you just a brief overview of what the whole process entails of buying something.
Okay, so as you can see on this slide here, required sources. This list of required sources is important to remember because even before you use a state contract, either at the state level or agency level, you're required to use one of these state entities first and foremost by law. So if they offer a good or service that you are in need of and they can meet your requirements, you have to buy from them. So just to go through those, Utah Correctional Industries, State Mail and Distribution, State Print Services, State Fleet, and the Department of Technology Services. So just keep that in mind as you're looking for whatever it is you might be procuring, that these are required sources. I think I've had confusion on this and questions come out where they say, oh, this is competing with the state contract. This takes precedence over any state contract that might be in existence. And some things to be aware of. We get a lot of questions on DTS. There is an approval path for DTS, technology-related procurements. So just some key words to be mindful of. If you're looking to procure anything hardware, software related, this indicates anytime you have any of these red flags, these keywords on your procurement documentation, most likely you need to get approval from DTS. And we can help facilitate that. You can work directly with DTS. We've actually created a new role in our group. Trevor Ward is actually helping us with a focused effort on facilitating that sometimes complex world of not only procurement, but DTS approval.
And then one other thing on the required sources. Does East Birch Creek ring a bell with anybody? What's been the reception on East Birch Creek? Anybody have any comments?
You get what you order.
Right. So another required source, in addition to UCI and State Fleet and those kind of people, is rehab programs like East Birch Creek. They're made up of people with disabilities, and there's they call it a set-aside contract. So there's them, the people that come in and do the shredding in the offices, Columbus Community Center, their rehab program. But anyways, we just got word that East Birch Creek is no longer going to be the uniform people. They agreed to to cancel that contract. So if you're using East Birch Creek, just be aware that I think at the beginning of the year, you're gonna have to switch over to, I think, G&K or Alsco is the other one. So just be aware of that. Contract purchases, if it's on a state contract or we have an agency contract, you're required to use those. And I just wanted to highlight what the state contract, kind of run you through the process of searching the state contracts. If you, just a quick search, if you have something that you're wanting to buy, you can just do a quick search there in the box. If you want to filter it out and get to the advanced stuff, you can search by vendor, you can search by contract number if you know the number, any variation of the things there. And then our agency contract system, our search engine is much the same, but it looks a little bit more 90-ish, 1990-ish. So we are going to be changing this hopefully soon, but it's a lot similar to state purchasings where you just kind of search by keyword and vendor, that kind of thing. Just notice the transition between slides here. Wasn't that great? That was fantastic, right? All right.
Yeah, when we get to the emergency and urgent topics, just notice the slide transition between those two. It's really going to be quite impressive. I'd like to thank Tyler for doing that. So moving on to small purchasing, this is something that is intended to give you some flexibility and give you autonomy with your procurement decisions. If something's not on a state contract or an agency contract and it's under these dollar amounts, you can independently procure these without any interaction with our procurement group. It's important that you understand the limits and thresholds that are involved with this small purchasing requirement. So any individual item that is under $1,000 is considered a small purchase as long as it's not, again, I'll reiterate, as long as it's not on a state contract or agency contract. So it depends, again, what your requirements are. If you've defined those well enough that you can look on the state contract, if it's there, great, buy it from the contract. If not, you can proceed as a small purchase. And that under $1,000 not only includes the goods, but it also includes any shipping charges that might be associated with that procurement. So if I'm buying a desk or something specialized furniture that I need that is not on a state contract, it's $900. That'd be a small purchase. If it costs me $500 in shipping, that's a separate line item, and that's also under $1,000. So I can procure that without any need for a contract because it is under that dollar value per line item. The other threshold is $5,000. I cannot exceed $5,000, or if I do, I need to get with state procurement or with UDOT procurement, rather, to put a contract in place. So just understand these thresholds. The other thing to be mindful of is $50,000 is the cap. And this is designed so that we don't just funnel a lot of purchases to any single vendor. So if we start to approach a dollar value of $50,000 spent with any single vendor, our comptroller's office is monitoring that. They will make us aware, and we will communicate that back to you. Because once we get to that dollar amount, we should be putting a contract in place, is the idea. So that pretty much covers small purchases. There is a required training that you all should have taken. If not, you're required to take that in order to make sure that you understand this policy. Any questions on small purchases? We all pretty clear on that? Okay. The next thing I want to just cover is the non-small purchase, where if an item is over 1,000, you still can procure that independently. The only other requirement is that you get a minimum of 2 quotes. So you can go out to the vendor community on your own, get at least 2 quotes, preferably 3 quotes, for anything over 1,000 but under 5,000. And again, as long as you include that documentation with your invoice to get payment, you can do that on your own. So procurement doesn't need to be involved, the 2 quotes I mentioned, and you award to the low bid, responsive and responsible bidder. I'll reiterate, over 5,000, just give us a call. We do have a procurement services online that we would ask you to submit that requisition so that we can follow it all the way through to completion. And we want to have documentation for this as well. In the event that we have an audit, I know Jimmy's in the room. We're glad to have you, Jimmy. He keeps us all straight. So, anyway, if there's any questions on this, we'll have some time at the end. So, thank you.
All right, sole sources, the dreaded sole source. No, I shouldn't say that, but before the code changed in 2013, sole sources were interesting. If you know Kent Beers, you know he is very, how do I say, he's very, I don't know, he's kind of a stick in the mud in its sole sources, but he goes through a stringent review process if there's one up there, and because his philosophy is, how many people in the world are there that really only make one thing? Or, if there's something, how many people can make this microphone? There's several. So he doesn't really believe that there's a whole lot of sole sources in the world. But he did change the code recently where it said it has to be reasonably available from a single supplier. And so if that's kind of the crux of the sole sources in state government, it has to be reasonably available from the one supplier. There's different justifications you can use, and we'll get into the form a little bit, but if you think it is a sole source, go ahead, like it says there, get us involved, put in a PSO request, and fill out the form. And this is the form. Probably most people in this room, if you've bought something via sole source, know this form. Just ask for the company information, what you're doing. You have to justify why it's a sole source and why it's only available from this one person at this one time. And there's different things. Transition costs can be a justification, or various amounts of other things. This form changes quite a bit based on different rules that come out from state purchasing and different things. But so always make sure you have the most up-to-date form. We have that on our website. But a sole source, we just want to highlight, a sole source is not the best source. It's not your preferred source. It's not the most convenient source. Not your favorite source, or your brother, your aunt, your uncle, whatever. Not necessarily the cheapest source, but you just have to be able to justify why you're getting it from that one person at that time. All right, hold on. Oh, it's a pop quiz, everybody. We all ready? All right.
Now, let me just remind you, there are prizes. You can choose between a Snickers bar or a Mentos pack, depending on which way you lean. We have a variety, so.
Again, procurement's a little dull, so we try to make this brighten it up a little, right? Did you see all your faces light up when that was great? That was great. All right, here it is. So who can tell me the 5 required source agencies that we highlighted earlier? And if you can, you get a Snickers or a Mentos.
First hand up, anyone. Was there a hand back there? Would you like to stand up and...
State your name, your occupation. No, I'm kidding.
I'm Amy and I do damage.
All right.
So, UCI mail, transit,
But Tyler, was that correct? I
yeah.
think that sounded right.
Yeah.
So, here, we're going to give you both, the Mentos and the Snickers, because that was really well done. Thank you. Thank you. Well, that's what's impressive. It's good.
Is that all 5? You said all 5, right?
Let's double check her. So Utah Correctional Industries, State Mail, print services, fleet and technology services.
And the bonus question, what's the one that's not up there that I mentioned? No, not sole source. The rehab. Yeah, the rehab people.
I think Penny got that. Although Penny, I don't know if that counts. She does this every day.
Stickers or a
Okay,
memento?
Penny, which would you like?
All right, I'll keep it for me.
Penny, come up after, we'll give you one. Thank you. All right, we're running low on supply. We'll see how we end the presentation. All right, exceptions to contract purchases. This is important to understand because by law, we have to use a state or agency contract without one of these exceptions. So in an emergency condition, we don't expect you to follow a lengthy procurement process. If there's a situation that needs immediate attention, we expect you to get it resolved any way that is necessary. So it's important that you limit it to what is necessary. If you have a tree that's fallen on the road and you need to clear the pathway for commuters, get the tree removed, but don't proceed to pave miles of roadway after that and claim it's an emergency. So just the immediate emergency at hand. We do ask that you contact the procurement division as soon as possible, within a day preferably of it happening. Obviously, you can contact us before if it makes sense. But the emergency purchase is a provision that allows you to take care of any situation you may encounter. Oh, here we go. This is it.
That was amazing.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Tyler. The unanticipated or urgent purchase, this was added, I think, just a couple years ago to continue to add flexibility to, especially to UDOT maintenance workers who are out in the field every day, and you come across a situation that isn't necessarily an emergency, but it is urgent and it needs attention. So with this provision, you can procure something that potentially is off contract in order to handle an urgent situation. You still, if you can use a state contract or an agency contract, that is preferred. We ask that you look at those contracts first. But if not, you can buy it from any provider, the good or service that you need. Some of the language that's mentioned here for this provision is that it's to avoid stopping a public construction project. Oftentimes, if you're short a certain part and you've got a whole team or crew standing around for hours waiting for that part, it's a huge cost to the state. So that doesn't help anyone. We want you to get what you need and move on. If it's an immediate repair to a facility or equipment, and then any other urgent condition. We do have a form out there that's on the UDOT procurement website. Every region should be aware of this form. In order to document it properly, we've developed this to capture those scenarios where we buy off contract. It helps our auditors, if they do need to review why we purchased something, it keeps a history of why we bought off contract. And we encourage you to use this. As the situation arises, feel free to use this provision. But use that form too. And we do ask that you at least get verbal approval. In every case, you cannot be expected to fill out that form right while the situation is happening. But at least get verbal approval from either the district engineer for the region or your respective group leader. And then once that's documented, we'll keep it in the file and you're fine to proceed. Any questions on? Yes? Yeah, goods and services, sure, yes, depending on what you need, absolutely. Any other questions? Okay. All right, we now have our second chance for winning Snickers bar or Mentos here. So now, the procurement team in the audience who maybe have seen this, you're disqualified, unable to participate. But I'm going to show some images up here. And if you can name that unanticipated urgent or unanticipated emergency condition, you could be the winner of a Snickers bar or Mentos. So here we go. Does anybody know what this was from?
Oh, yeah, that's the NOVA the airport taxi that was driving on I-80, and overpass, trunk came down and fell on.
So a UDOT bridge, a chunk of
Like 13 east.
fell on top of a vehicle, right? So we needed, obviously we don't want chunks of concrete falling on people. So that's an emergency/urgent condition that we'd want to respond to immediately. Thank you. What was your name? John, thanks, John. All right, what about this one? Hilldale? Shane? I think Shane got it. Are you just waiting just in case, Mark? I think Mark did have his hand up. It's Hilldale, yeah. So Carlos mentioned this yesterday. We had a roadway washed away. We needed immediate attention. So that is another. Okay, well, it's a town. The town got washed away. Thank you, Shane. But in any event, this is something where we need to respond quickly. We don't want to worry about if or not we have a contract. So this is a situation where that provision helps us to just get the urgent situation resolved.
Those guys need to be commended, though. They did that whole thing with very limited need for urgent purchases.
And that's a good point. Thank you, Shane. In many cases, the fastest responders are our contracted vendors. So keep that in mind. It shouldn't be something where we seek to go off contract necessarily. It just gives you the autonomy to do that, or you're legally allowed to in that situation. Was it all covered on contract, most of it, Shane?
Well, I bet maybe just $100 worth of equipment repairs and oil and things.
But for the most part, contracted vendors responded. That's great. That means our contracts are working well for us, so that's good news. All right, last one. This one might be hard to decipher. It is a water main break, yes. This was on 126 South. Yeah? Yeah, this was all over the news about, it was a couple months ago, but just there in Draper, off of I-15, and I think it was at 126. There was a water main break, and again, something we need to respond quickly. Urgent emergency conditions. I think it was right back here. Nobody's taking the Mentos? Okay. All right, thank you. I bring this up because these situations do arise. UDOT is expected to meet the public's needs and expectations. The procurement process is a tool to help us and not hinder us. So as these situations arise, just understand where we have flexibility and reach out. Please contact our procurement group in any one of these situations so that we can be aware of it, and we'll do what we can to help as well.
Okay, then, exceptions to the contracts, there is an out if you feel like the contract isn't going to do what you need it to do, or the vendor isn't able to perform what you need them to do. There is an out built into the code. The main thing is if you have somebody in mind that you think can do a better job or do it cheaper or something to that nature, we just need to have you demonstrate that this outside vendor will agree to the same terms and conditions as the contracted vendor, will agree to the same maintenance and service as the contracted vendor, the same warranty, the same quality of work, and it's either got to be better than or equal to what the cost is coming from the state contracted vendor. So there is that out in there. When I was at state purchasing, we had maybe 4 or 5 of those in a 3.5-year period. So they don't come up very often, but they do come up. There's been a couple while I've been here at UDOT. Does anybody have any questions about that? I know it can be a confusing type of situation, but the big thing is if you just feel like maybe the contracted vendor is too far away, there's a lot of that in Region 4 where the vendors are always located up here in Salt Lake City. You know, they need something down in St. George. It doesn't make sense for them to go all the way down to St. George if it's going to cost them a little bit more money. So these should be few and far between, but there is the availability there.
And I'll just add really quick to just understand this exception. You've got to remember the constantly trying to protect the state and the risk to the state. I've had several inquiries in the time I've been here regarding frustration with a state or agency contract because the pricing might be outrageous when I can buy it across the street for half the price that's on state contract. But in addition to just the price, we have a lot of terms and conditions that protect the state. We have liability built into that, where a lot of these vendors take on a lot of risk. If something goes wrong with one of their products, they're going to cover that. They're going to warranty it. If somebody's harmed because of their product, they're liable for that. If you buy off contract, in many cases, the state is going to be fully liable for something that goes wrong because they haven't agreed to the same terms and conditions. So keep that in mind as you're going out and making these procurement decisions. It's not as simple as just looking at price. And oftentimes, if there is a problem, perhaps we need to revisit the contract that does exist and make it better, or go out and bid it differently than we have in the past. And so communicate that with us. Let us know. We want the feedback. If there is a poor performing vendor, if there's quality issues, communicate with us so that we can make take the appropriate action. But yeah, just wanted to add that.
One example that Alan Bachman from the Attorney General's office always gives is he's the Attorney General assigned to DFCM. Is it better to go buy a $2 light switch from Home Depot or use the contracted vendor and pay $5 for the same light switch? Because if that $2 light switch burns the $5 million building down, the state's going to be protected. But if you buy off contract from Home Depot, the Home Depot might just replace the light switch. So that's kind of the benefit to using a contract versus going off contract.
And we're at an abrupt conclusion here. Any questions? This is the open forum now. If you have any procurement-related issues, concerns.
We usually get mauled at this point with questions. So
we've been waiting all year for this moment, so please ask questions. Yes.
On your asphalt purchases for the rural areas like Heber and Strawberry, Strawberry's gets an asphalt from Orem, whereas Heber has to go clear to the point of the mountain to get their asphalt. Is there a way we could just go, because it's a 40-minute turnaround difference between the point of the mountain and Orem?
Have you, so we're in the process of putting these contracts together right now, and so that's a good question. All of that specific question should be addressed through central maintenance. And so Ryan Ellsworth, I don't know if Ryan's here.
No, actually,
Is that Shauna and Ryan?
that should be the analyst that did the analysis on what shed from what plant.
So it's a,
Yeah, we're reading straight.
But address your concerns.
it's a collaborative issue. So here's how this is going to work. We put the contracts together, but we need input from every region and every end user. So if you have an issue, we have contract analysts at each region. You can contact our procurement group directly. So Wendy Kemp, would you mind standing, Wendy? Wendy's helping us with this commodity that you're talking about right now. So voice your concerns and let's see if we can get it addressed.
Brian Ellsworth sent out an email asking for input because we're going to start a meeting. So if you guys want to send any of your questions, concerns, or comments to Ryan, we're going to be meeting on that shortly after this conference. So, yeah, any questions, please forward them so we can address them before the next conference.
But it's nothing that can't be resolved.
Right.
Yeah, we can fix that. The short answer is yes, we can fix it. But we need to know about it, and it's a collaboration between procurement and central maintenance because they have the specs and the requirements, and they ultimately submit those to our procurement group. So we need to keep everybody in the loop on where there's a deficiency and where it needs to be fixed. So good question. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes?
Federal funds we use on procurement or is it strictly state funds?
That's a great question. Federal funds, so if you look at UDOT, we're not the only procurement entity within UDOT, right? All of our federal requirements mostly are handled through construction or consultant services because they have provisions in place to handle those. To answer your question, yes, we can put federal contracts together, but we need to make sure we have those provisions in those contracts. I would say 99%, if not all of our contracts are with state funds, and so we typically don't use federal dollars on our contracts because we don't have those federal requirements in our terms and conditions. That being said, we can help you if you have a situation where you need to put together a federal contract. We'd be happy to add those provisions into into the requisition. Does that answer your question?
Just kind of following up a little bit with that, with the, I mean, that typically would apply mostly with the construction federal aid contract. For your normal procurements, I'm just wondering how closely your state procurement rules follow federal procurement, federal acquisition regulations. I get that question a lot, how much federal highway, we want to do this.
Sure.
We want to use state procurement. My first response is no, because like you just said, the construction division, consultant services, they know all the specialties, which you may not, but for normal
Sure.
purchases, it sounds like you're really close to the FAR.
And I'll maybe attempt to address it, I'll maybe defer to Tyler as well. My understanding, and I can't speak tick for tack on every little thing, I believe the state procurement code, in many cases, the requirements far exceed federal requirements. But there are certain things that we don't have, and so it's a matter of, are all the requirements met in order to proceed with that procurement at the federal level? So, yeah, in many cases, our state requirements, I would say, meet a lot of the federal requirements, but maybe not in every case.
I mean, the primary ones are your number of vendors, your sole, who you, your, what would you call it, the people you go after, 3 or more, that kind of thing, any thresholds, that kind of thing.
Yeah, as far as the FAR, I think the state of Utah is probably one of, if not the most restrictive state procurement code in the nation. So if you look at other states, they're much less restrictive and probably don't follow the FAR. From what I understand of the FAR, we just, the only things we don't have in there are like the Buy America and the Davis-Bacon kind of stuff, and that's the only things that we're missing. Yeah, so if that doesn't apply to that specific type of procurement, you should be fine to use federal funds on ours, because it is that restrictive.
It can work. We had a situation down there in the Grand Staircase, with working with BLM, where they ended up using some of our state contracts for sign material, because we were working with the BLM's purchasing agents.
So it did meet their requirements.
Those met the requirements, but those,
Sure.
Those are specific, because they do all meet Buy America, because our signing stuff is the same, and, maintenance and any procurement is construction projects. But in that case, yeah, they affirmed that they aligned with their.
And as long as that alignment's there and it's reviewed, we just don't do a lot of federal requirements or deal with them. It's not to say we can't, or we can't in the future do more of them, so. Yes?
How hard is it to amend a contract, working with the Soundwall contract, replacement per panel? The replacement per post is what's in the contract, but it needs some soil work, and the bid work is a little bit included in it, but how hard is it to have that contractor submit some additional items and have you guys at that contract?
As long as it fits within the scope of the original solicitation, the RFP or the invitation for bid, whatever it was, as long as it falls within the scope, it's pretty easy. If there's multiple vendors on there, we might put it out to both of the vendors and add it to both contracts, but it's pretty easy. As long as you're comfortable with the pricing they give and it's somewhat in line with the other stuff on the contract.
Yeah, the only thing we want to be careful of is if you, to Tyler's point, if you start to change that scope dramatically, are you potentially putting at a disadvantage all of those vendors that could have maybe bid and even won that contract had that been a part of it initially, right? So you got to make sure you're within that scope to be fair, again, to those that have already gone through the legal bidding process.
On that same note, would you guys send out requests for the additional bids, or is that something that the manager of that contract for that specific project would send out directly to the vendors?
We would just work directly with the vendors that are on contract if we're going to make an amendment. Is that what you're asking?
Is it done by us or them, though?
Procurement group, or would it be the manager of that contract and the individual division that would send that out?
It would need to come through the procurement group. If you're amending the contract, yeah, through our procurement group.
Does that happen fairly quickly, or is that something that waits weeks to amend the contract?
It can be very quick. I don't see why it couldn't. Yeah.
So, yeah, an amendment has to be signed by the contractor, and then it has to be signed by procurement, and then it has to go to Jason Davis, and then to the comptroller's office. So just a matter of time of gathering up all those signatures. That's the biggest amount of time.
And then also the ones, I mean, you mentioned a lot about the ITS and the TOC stuff, but there's other stockpile material that you keep, like traffic poles, stuff like that. Is that true of the state procurement business as well?
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
those you just don't put on the projects, and again, that would be, are you buying the poles, or does somebody, a functional group, as you order those poles through you and assure that, I mean, like, you mentioned Buy America, certain groups would have to be Buy America. If they're not, no.
So all the poles that we buy, we work very closely with traffic and safety and with the cabinets and whatnot with the TOC. And all of the requirements come from the respective division at UDOT to make sure it's compliant. But yeah, we do have contracts in place for all of those materials, and we have them in stock and for any projects out there.
Anything else? If we had a couple of minutes, I wanted to go into the contract, how to search for a contract a little bit more. Because it seems like that's a lot of the questions that come in is there already a state contract in place? Is there an agency contract? So if we had a little bit of time, I just wanted to go into that a little bit further. So this is the state purchasing website where you can search for state contracts. And these state contracts are available to not only UDOT, but the entire state, as well as political subdivisions and agencies of the federal government, and even nonprofits. So it's available to a lot of different people. We get very high volumes, and hopefully that resulted in those discounts, volume discounts. So for example, if you wanted to buy body armor, not that you would, but that's just an example. You just type body armor in, brings up anything with those keywords. There should be 5 or 6 different body armor contracts. We'll just look at this one. This is the Point Blank is kind of the one that the state uses the most. You hit over there on the view contract. Up here at the top, it'll show you who's the contact person from the company, the contractor, who do you call to place an order, name and contact information. Right here, it'll tell you if there's any, if this is a multiple award contract. If you see here, this is a multiple award. I think there's 5 or 6 different companies if you want to look around a little bit. If you want to look at usage reports, it'll show you who across the state is using these. It's broken down by city, county, higher ed, public ed, state agencies, and then nonprofits and different things. So you can go through there and look at what, if you want to get in deeper to it, you can click on view. Oh, that one doesn't have any usage, but it'll bring up an Excel spreadsheet. And you can look at, this is a line item, you can see what people across the state are using, what type of body armor they're using. And this is on every state contract. It's got that level of detail. Go back here, you can see the full contract includes the original RFP, the solicitation. You can look at all the different responses they got from that RFP. All the pricing from the different vendors, but the main thing you want to be aware of is just this summary document. They kind of take it and summarize it, and it'll tell you if it's FOB destination, what the price guarantee is, and everything else. And you scroll down, it's got the pricing down here for those. So that's kind of the basic of a state contract and how to search for it and what to do. If you're looking for a UDOT specific contract that UDOT put together itself, it's much the same. If you just want to buy a truck, it'll pull up all the different contracts with that keyword of truck in it. It'll show you who the agent is. Penny is the equipment ops person in our group, so she should know these contracts inside and out, right?
It's a lot of pressure.
If you scroll over, it'll tell you who the vendor is, the effective dates, and all that kind of stuff. Hit details over here. It'll bring up the contact information. This one's semi-service, their website, and then you can click on all the documents down here at the bottom. You see all the different amendments that it has gone through and everything else. All right. Does anybody have any questions on just how to search for a contract, how to use them?
A
That kind of thing.
recommendation is to keep it broad, not so specific, it's not gonna come up, like, if you're looking for brake
Right.
pads, don't put in brake pads, please pull up
Auto parts,
auto parts.
yeah.
Someday we'll change that, but for now, keep the search broad if you can, and then dig deeper. And one last thing, I just want to make sure I thank and give the appropriate credit to all of our team. We have very talented procurement agents that have been doing this for a long time, so reach out to any one of our agents if you have questions. I know we have assigned commodities just to make it somewhat coordinated with the different divisions, but we have a really talented group that know contracting really well. And if you have questions or concerns, don't hesitate to contact anyone on our team. We'll do what we can to help you in any way that we can. So,
One last thing, I was on a flight one time with Southwest, and they got me to Los Angeles 10 minutes early. And they got on the phone over the plane, and they said, we got here 10 minutes early, so just so you know, if you're ever on a Southwest flight again and we're late, you owe us 10 minutes. So we're getting you guys out about 15 minutes early. So if you're ever in a training, procurement training, and we run late, just know you owe us 15 minutes. All right?
make sure you sign the roll. If you haven't, please do. And thank you for coming. Enjoy the conference.